This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Tuesday, early Wednesday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving you a look at the weather situation here across the area. You do see temperatures here, the storyline sitting pretty chilly out there. I hope you are bundled up if you have to go out at this late hour, or if you're going out in the morning for that morning commute. It's definitely going to be a chilly one here. I know we're looking at a 26 here east of Stark on my thermometer right now. So that definitely does tell that weather story. So I hope, again, you guys are staying warm out there. It's going to be a chilly pattern ahead. I mean, Sunday could be about the coldest we've had here, those wind chill values in a long time. So, really, you got to be careful. Dangerous, cold, hard freeze type of conditions here. So, just be very mindful of what we're talking about here in this type of situation. Again, have some of those freeze concerns and days ahead here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. All that cold air coming in, the winds coming from the north and the west there, just so chilly around. So again, please be bundling up. This can be dangerous out there as we're looking. Some of the more rural areas where we're at, we actually got down to 22 earlier here in the night. We warmed up some because we have some cloud cover around actually, as we're looking at quite a bit of cloud cover in fact. So that's kind of interesting to see. I think it's too dry for any of this though. In terms of, because some of our radar products are trying to sell if I go to the higher, sensitivity mode, some type of moisture, but the dew points are so low, it'd be really hard to get anything to the surface in this type of pattern here, it would seem, as we're looking at it. Some of the models are showing some of this potential, but again, on the accelerator that kind of examines what's actually reaching toward the surface, not really seeing that right now. So again, that's kind of the storyline there as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them. I know, again, that hard freeze concern, such a big deal. We're going to have a coastal storm, apparently. It seems developed based on the model guidance as we look ahead in the days ahead. I know we had a situation out toward Mississippi where it's still so terrible with all that freezing rain impact, or in like Ole Miss there, Oxford, Mississippi. It's just terrible. Classes canceled all week there because of the ice, and there's so many people out in the cold. The roads impassable in a lot of cases, and it's just really hard to get the people power out. So many places, in Mississippi and Tennessee and some surrounding areas as well. Just, not everybody got hit as hard as they could have, but other spots really got hit so hard. Very serious situation, obviously, as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I know with that coastal storm ahead, though, I know just more storm action in toward that weather picture here. It's been so active here lately. Third weekend in a row, where it looks like we're going to be busy here in the weather center. Of course, we had that tornadic activity in the southern flank on Sunday that we were tracking here locally as well. But let me go ahead and see. This will be the GFS model, and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. This is in toward maybe, as we're looking here, kind of that later Saturday period. And then you'll be able to kind of see what we're dealing with, what we're tracking. A lot of that snow to the north. We'll have to see if any of that works its way into our area here, because just east of us here on this. And some of the higher res models, looking at some of them, behind the scenes, we can't really show them to you on the air. Some of them are, not going out that far, but others are, and they indicate maybe some type of this potential here. Some even honestly broadcaster of models here in the TV and digital realm. Some of those we don't have access to, but those can really, show some of this, and they are in some cases even. So, I mean, this is trying to show like flurries here, in Central Florida Saturday night, but there could be more of that here as we're looking and as we're tracking things, filling in on the map. So we'll have to watch for that. Shouldn't be, much accumulation here locally. It would be more about snow flurries and so snow showers here as we look ahead and toward the timeline. So again, we'll just continue to watch to the north, though. It's going to be a big snow event potentially in the Carolinas, where they could have a lot of snow potentially up there and into Virginia and the like. That's, what this model is showing us, all that white stuff and gray stuff on the map is snow. So that's a big deal, obviously, as we're tracking, as we're monitoring. Just something to kind of be, vigilant about. Not really an ice storm, a freezing rain situation, sleet situation this time. It doesn't look like, but that still can be very impactful. Could have quite a bit of wind with that, and that's why our wind chills are going to be so low as we look into our Sunday morning. Look at all this wind and the overall pattern. These are some high numbers. Could have some coastal impacts here from this too, so we have to be aware of that because it's like when you have hurricane in the tropical cyclone hurricane season, you have wind and you have coastal impacts, and we could have some of that here because the pressure will be potentially, according to some of the models, similar to that of a hurricane developing off the east coast there, off of the eastern seaboard as it moves away, and that's providing all that snow further north, especially. But with the low, we'll just have to kind of see how the winds kind of wrap around because that's going to make things chilly. Because when you have a freeze, maybe a hard freeze, and then you have wind chills, getting down into the single digits, maybe toward our area Sunday morning. That's because you have a lot of wind. So it's going to be very nasty in terms of being so blustery. I mean, sometimes we'll get those single digit wind chills in some South Georgia counties, but I can't really remember the last time North Central Florida we're really seeing single digit wind chills widespread like what we're right now forecasting for Sunday morning. We could have 8, 9. Some areas there could be 6 degrees there with that wind chill, even as we're looking, especially towards South Georgia. So, I mean, that is very dangerous. You got to bundle up here and take this very seriously, obviously, with this cold. Pipes, just all sorts of things need to be protected here in this type of instance as we're tracking things. I know, let me go ahead. I know it's so dry too. That's, something we have to watch out for in the weeks ahead. I know it's dry here in the studio. It's just, makes your eyes dry because so used to here in Florida being so moist, and it's some of that chapstick weather for sure, those low dew points. But as we go ahead and we're going to go ahead and see here right now, a look at some of the graphics, here. I know, just kind of telling that story. You do want to make sure you're protecting people, pets, plants, and pipes. I know, again, so, dry. That's something we'll have to watch out for wildfire threats, with later on. I know our humidity value is so low in here. We're used to, 40% humidity in here inside. It's in the, about 30. So we're starting, you have that, thought about static electricity and things like that. It's just so dry, and inside, and just you're not used to that around here in our North Central Florida areas. We're gonna have that stick around. This is gonna be long event here. Cold. There's not gonna be many mornings in the next 7 that are gonna be having lows above freezing. So you gotta take precautions pretty much every morning. Maybe some days not as much about the pipes. Some days though it will be about the pipes. Sunday morning especially. A thing about Sunday morning, I know we had 18 here east of Stark going back not too long ago, and we got 22 this morning, but we're in a rural area. Now with the wind on Sunday morning, we actually may not get to 18. Maybe we get to 19 or 20 degrees. But the thing about that is the beaches actually could have a hard freeze. Central Florida, Orlando may have a hard freeze. The metro areas, everybody's going to have similar temperatures because you're not going to have, you're going to have a situation here where we have so much mixing going on. And you don't generally get that around our areas when we have it this cold. We can get, like I said, we got 18 just over a week and a half ago now, here east of Stark, a rural area. Other spots, not getting that. But when you have a calm, clear night there, those winds aren't up. You're going to have different temperatures rural to urban. But because of Sunday morning being so windy, I mean, very windy here, we're already going to be, low 20s, upper teens. And that's going to be widespread pretty much. I mean, it may be slightly warmer by a few degrees at the most in some of these, more urban areas. But we're talking about, right in downtown Jacksonville, maybe pipe bursting weather. St. Augustine, kind of on the edge of that pipe bursting weather as well. Orlando even maybe pipe bursting weather. We don't see that very often. So it's isn't just about the normally cold area Sunday morning. I think that's a key takeaway. We got to be really careful about that fire risk. With it's going to stay so cold. We're going to be in the 40s all weekend. But at the most for the, those highs there in the afternoons. I mean, not getting any higher than that is what I'm trying to allude to there. So this is going to be very dangerous. We're going to take this very seriously here as we look ahead toward, the weekend, because this isn't just going to be about the rural areas getting into the teens. We could have some urban areas here getting, right there toward that line, right there close to 19 or 20 degrees, somewhere around there. And the wind chills, we're going to have very gusty winds Sunday morning as well. So there's wind chills. We're expecting single digit wind chills. There's minimum wind chills for most of our area. And some of those could even make their way to the beaches Sunday morning. That is very, very unusual. And that's, again, maybe not the coldest air temperatures we've had, even this winter for where we're at. It'd be close in Stark, east of Stark, rural areas. In town, it probably will be the coldest they've had all winter, maybe, multiple winters. But, as we're looking as an area as a whole, those wind chills, I know the records on some of that stuff, they're not the temperatures, so that's a calculation. I'll have to see how far those records go back because these have got to be some of the coldest wind chills we've ever had here, in the 21st century around Stark, Jacksonville, something like that here since, the turn of the century. These are, Sunday morning we could have single digit type of wind chills here. Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville, St. Augustine even could be like 9 on that wind chill, with that wind chill factor, that wind chill number, that feels like temperature because it's going to be so breezy with freezing conditions. Again, could have a hard freeze all the way to the beaches, to the East Coast beaches. So you got to take this very seriously. As the rural areas are going to be, one of the coldest mornings we've had all winter. The beaches maybe one of the coldest mornings in several winters here. Orlando, one of the coldest winters in mornings, I should say, in a long time. So we just got to be very careful here with that. As we go ahead and see some more information, we've had all that freezing rain in the north. Power outages still persist as we're looking up toward the north here, as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things. I know we still have over 400,000 customers in the dark right now, according to Power.us, as we're looking across the country in the wake of this ice storm situation. And it's so cold, it's below freezing. People's houses are falling below freezing. It's just awful. I know, with freezing rain, the rain freezes on contact with the surface. As you're looking at things and as you're tracking things, and we still have 134,000 or so, almost 135,000 customers in the dark in Tennessee, about 125,000 or so in Mississippi, over 80,000 in Louisiana, about 17,000 in Texas, almost 16,000 in Kentucky. So very impactful situation. This is a long-lasting scenario for people because their houses are so cold. This can be, we've had this be a very deadly situation. Many fatalities reported from this winter storm. I know we'll have to, see if we can get an exact number on that in days and weeks ahead because sometimes it's a little tricky. I'm sure, sadly, between the carbon monoxide arrest with people running the generators improperly in the days ahead, we're going to have that number go up. So it's not good, though, because it's so cold in the houses. People can have hypothermia even eventually because, you don't want to be just out in below freezing temperatures here, for days and days. And it's not like being outside of your house. It's being in your house. It can get below freezing eventually because of all this cold outside. That's not good at all. It's very serious. So we got to take this very seriously. So again, I know this is something we're hoping for this weekend here, Easter Stark. This is the positive side of things. Maybe we'll get something like this. Maybe we'll get a little bit more. It's possible. And I'm not sure because, high-res models, some of them, we can't actually look at here and see you on the air. They're indicating this. The lower resolution models kind of say more so to the north and the east is where we're going to have the concentration. I would think we would have a chance of flurries here. Easter Stark Saturday and even into early Sunday, maybe that starts to slack off as, the system, we have that low kind of move away. But, even Tampa, there's a chance we could have some snow flurries coming off the Gulf there, the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico there, as we're looking and as we're tracking things. That's something to kind of be mindful of. We don't really see that around, very often at all. So I'll have to see because this is a unique pattern here. There are some analogs, and now granted, the number in the system is something that the university there, St. Louis University does. They, have analogs. We use it for severe weather in the weather community a lot. Don't around here have to use about winter weather, in regards to that very often at all. But I've been using it, and it was on our 1989 Christmas Eve event as one of the higher analogs earlier on. And each run, it's getting lower. It's like the last one out of the 15 now that it shows. So it shows a possible similarities in some ways to the 89 event, though that is dropping in comparison as other similarities, in terms of other events kind of jump over that. And it's a situation where, that those didn't necessarily generally have snow here around the First Coast region. Doesn't mean we can't get flurries, though. That's definitely a possibility on the backside here. We'll try to break that down more in the days ahead. It's still a little early because we need to see HRRR. We need to see some of these other high resolution models because it may end up being that, all it takes is like, light precip on the backside of this. And we could have flurries all over the place Saturday and early Sunday. And I think it's possible our models, the global models aren't picking up on that. Normally, if it's light rain, we don't really care that much. But in the winter situation, it's, instead of light rain, it's maybe light flurries everywhere. And that's a really big deal. Not, maybe not Albany, it's not because you've just had 2 years of snow. But for Stark, I've been here 25 years. We've had snow flurries like this twice. This event and then 2010, the day after Christmas, a little bit bigger than this, a little longer lasting than this. That's all we've had here in 25 years plus. I might have to go back to 89, and then that event we actually did have accumulating snow on the car tops. I wasn't here or around live back then, but my point is, looking at pictures and stuff, we did have some of that accumulating snow on the car tops, even in Stark. So we had that in 89. We had snow here in 77 here in Bradford County. We also had 1899. We had snow. Now, 1899 and the 77 events were, measurable snow. The 89 event, it was measurable to the north here in Stark. Not 100% sure. There's a lot of slush and, not fun stuff. We're not expecting the ice factor, except, of course, if snow is below freezing and it actually, is falling when it's below freezing, then it could stick a little bit. But, in most of the country, that wouldn't even be a factor because we're so, you know, you know, it's so unusual here. We're not used to it. It's something that got to take into consideration. But as you see here, the preset forecast, again, I can't call it the rain forecast because a lot of this will be wintry weather, especially maybe in North Carolina. They could have a big, big winter snow event here this weekend toward Raleigh, toward some of those areas there in North Carolina, give or take. I wanted to see how much of that moisture extends down the coast with those colder temperatures and how that mixes back behind because, again, not expecting really, for the most part, accumulating snow, maybe a dusting at the most here for our local area. But it's one thing. A dusting in Georgia is not that big of a deal. A dusting Tallahassee, not that big of a deal. Maybe a little bit more so. But a dusting in Jacksonville, Gainesville, Stark, St. Augustine, that's one of the biggest stories of the decade. I know that sounds crazy, but if you're watching from other parts of the country, but I mean that's one of the biggest stories, of the decade. If we just get a dusting of snow around here, and that's not off the table. Again, I don't really think we're gonna have accumulating. I don't know if it even measure to a tenth of an inch of snow here. But if we get a dusting, I know that's a little bit, those terms here are a little bit tricky sometimes. Even when I talk about dusting of snow, let me just look that up, make sure I'm not misleading you guys. So it's very light. In terms of, that snow there, as we're tracking. I know, people say maybe less than a half inch of snow with a dusting. As we're looking here, I mean, honestly, I would call it testing just any type of white stuff that actually hits the ground, so that actually it looks like frost even in some cases. So different things, we're not used to talking about around here. Again, I don't think it would be much. I don't think it would really be disruptive here. It wouldn't be a few inches like what we got in Georgia. I don't even think we'd get an inch here in our North Florida counties, but we could get enough to, cover elevated surfaces and the like. It's not out of the question in my assessment. Again, that would be very fun for the kids. We don't get that around here much at all. I mean, so again, it's the cold does the problem. The snow part, it may not happen. It's fun if it does in general for our area. Up north, it can be a big snow, which can be fun too. But eventually, it can be kind of overwhelming if they get as much as some of the models are showing around Raleigh and North Carolina and the like. They just keep getting hit with winter weather up there. I'm just thinking about all the basketball games that keep getting impacted up that way. But as we're looking down here again, if we get that down here, it would be, it'd be something that would be fun, but the cold is very dangerous and can be deadly. So we got to keep that in mind. Now, if you see these numbers, you see more around Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville, and other spots. A lot of that would actually be rain on Friday night as we're looking because it wouldn't be quite cold enough for that. Now, that's something that can, in theory, if there's enough moisture around, lead to black ice. Though I think our wind's probably so strong that probably wouldn't really happen because there wouldn't be enough overall precip. You see the numbers, a tenth of an inch or so, and and a little bit of that could be factored in that light snow. I don't want to. I guess dusting isn't even the right word, as because looking that up, that says over a tenth of an inch. I would say if we got it, it'd be like a trace. A trace of snow is possible here. It's Stark, Jacksonville, Gainesville, coming up, and that would be a really big deal. I know even in Albany or Waycross or Tallahassee, it's not that big of a deal. If we get in the Florida Peninsula here, and it could even happen around Tampa or Orlando, some of those areas in between. If we get any of that, then that, because of the ratios too, that's something to look at further north more than really our area. But the way the snow is going to be falling up there, I know it's going to be, it's not going to take much moisture to get a bunch of snow. So if we get it here, it's more about fun, but it'd be a huge deal. I mean, you just don't get that here in the First Coast area. didn't happen, really. We kind of had a little bit right at the border last year, but to actually get it, in many areas, we had the ocean effect snow going back when I was at FSU, was in Jacksonville area. We had a little bit of that, but just to get flurries around here, I mean, it's a really big deal. We had some of that in 2010, but it's, if it could be that or a little bit more than that, again, one of the biggest stories of the decade. I know it's sad. You might, if you're watching from anywhere else, if you're watching from even Tallahassee, Albany, Waycross, that kind of sounds crazy, but if we get that around Jacksonville, Stark, Gainesville, St. Augustine, some of these areas like City even, it's a really big deal and a big, big anomaly. So, and you can go to cloudtoday.com/radar for an interactive look at things. I mean, they're not going to necessarily get it down there, but I just know there was a big, big, like headline in 77 when Miami had snow. It was like the biggest story ever down there. So, not quite as big because it can happen a little bit more often up here, but to even just get a little tiny bit of that would be a really, really, really big deal here in our area. So, again, you can see where we're at in Bradford County. That's where we're, giving you the update from where I was on top of things for the 62 counties we were on with those tornado warning storms on that Sunday here, keeping you guys safe and informed, on all the different platforms. It's all about protecting and informing you, your friends, your family. Facebook, Casey Cloud WX, Facebook Cloud Weather, Twitter/X at Cloud Casey, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, and then cloudweather.com. So always trying to stay on top of things here for you. And then let's go ahead and show you now that extended forecast. Again, potentially historic local cold ahead. Snow flurries is so, it's hard to even say because it sounds so unbelievable saying it around here, but snow showers here possible Saturday and very early Sunday here toward the local area, even in north central and northeast Florida here. That's the thing that makes it unique. This isn't like, I don't think anybody's in our area, even in Georgia, in our Georgia local counties. They're not getting 2 or 3 inches, this weekend, like, what Albany got, but for, to have an actual chance of this here into north central Florida, I know, it would probably not be much, but it's possible, so be alert for that. It'd be more about the fun part, though, probably not even needing necessarily, winter weather advisory, definitely not a winter storm warning. They might issue, Jacksonville office might issue a winter weather advisory if we started getting that, if it really started, overachieving. But, it's something more about the fun of it here. It's just a bigger chance than normal for that. If it's a problem, and the real story, the real takeaway needs to be, you got to be worried about Sunday morning, folks, anybody out, without shelter really could have a life-threatening situation upon them as we're looking towards Sunday morning with those wind chills as though it's 6 degrees expected. That is awful. 19 again, when we do this here, we'll sometimes get, about that cold here east to Stark, but, we don't normally put on a 7-day because it's a localized cold, and even the city, Stark's like 5 degrees warmer, and we're 2 miles away. In town, they're 5-10 degrees warmer as we look ahead towards Sunday morning. That's not going to be the case. We're going to have everybody pretty uniform because of the winds. So even if we're around 19 here east of Stark, Jacksonville could actually be throughout town, around 19, maybe get a few degrees warmer. You do have the St. John's in there that factored in at Gainesville. You could actually be in the upper teens, just all in the town parts. In Stark, we were several degrees warmer than us that morning, a week and a half ago. They could be about the same. And that, that really causes a lot more folks, problems with those pipes bursting potentially. You say, oh, they got to 19 the other day. I didn't burst. Well, it's because you were 25 or so in town, and this time you could actually get to 19 Sunday morning. So, that's the whole point here. As we're tracking things, it's going to be because of the winds will be up. It'll be spreading, those uniform type temperatures around. Again, we have these rain or precip chances because it could be wintry weather mixed in here toward that weekend, which is such a huge deal. But wind chills. I mean, these are awful cold numbers. Probably the coldest 7 I've ever had to do here around here. We've been doing this for about 6 years or so, and it's probably the coldest 7 I've ever had to put out. I mean, freeze this morning, we're at 26 degrees to Stark now. We were down to 22 earlier, though. But there's clouds coming in some. You see 27 tomorrow morning. That's a freeze. Maybe a hard freeze. Friday, the one morning there, we start to edge up. And then Saturday, you edge up a little bit more. So, I mean, this is, 5 freezes here on this. And some areas could have 6 or 7. Or, I don't mean to make a joke there. But my point is, we could have, the whole period here with this, as we're looking at this, as we're looking at the whole extended forecast, we could have, this is very serious, and we're talking about here the snow, that situation here, that's one part of it, but the cold is the extreme dangerous part. We just got to be very, very, careful about here as we look ahead in the days and in the, you know, week ahead. This is something we don't see around here. It's well below average. Again, you don't normally see a 19 on a 7-day for me. I don't think I've ever had to put and I'll have to look back at that Christmas cold we had back in, was it 22, 23? I guess it was probably 22. That Christmas, cold we had when we had those temperatures. It was pretty chilly then. This is, somewhat similar, but maybe even a little bit worse. As we're looking, I don't, that's a really cold 7-day here. That with highs only in the mid 40s. Saturday maybe low to mid 40s. Sunday, so you're not warming up either. This is not didn't look like a forecast around Stark or North Central Florida. This is again, 19 to 42 might be the coldest we've had to go on a 7-day here. That is extremely, extremely cold. In fact, I'm gonna look back just real quick since if you're watching me or up late here, we've got through this. Let me just show you that a little bit longer, but I just want to go back here. Let me see if we have any questions or comments real quick from any of the viewers at home. I do this later on because we, have better looks at the models when we're on later like this, but latest zero ZU runs. But I want to look back at I can look that up on YouTube. That's the thing about, we can go back and look at old coverage, and I can get an idea here of how cold my 7-day was for that period, going back a few years ago. So just give me just 1 second here. I'm just gonna look at that behind the scenes. And we're looking at as we're tracking things, that Christmas cold a few years back. It was definitely a chilly period. Just gonna go back a little bit more here, it looks like, because I started out with the oldest and kind of worked my way up. So I guess coming up a little bit, if you know what I mean, but just in terms of the timeline. But just looking here to see what I had. We were talking about that, and just gonna see what I had on my 7-day there. Just a few days out, it looks like I had 22 and 44 for Sunday and 20 and 40 for Saturday. So yeah, very similar actually. As I'm looking here at that, looking back there at that event, I guess that would have been 3 years ago. So that would have been 22 then, a little over 3. So yeah, I had that weekend. I had 20 and 40 that Christmas Eve, and 22 and 44 for Christmas Day. So very similar. In some ways here as I'm looking at this in that regard. And they did have, I know that our south actually, they had some type of mixed precip in there as we were looking kind of sort of around the Space Coast that morning. It wasn't that, it was kind of, it didn't really look like snow. Maybe it was, but it was, so that was a little bit different pattern. And it's a lot different pattern, quite honestly, because we didn't have the situation here with the low, really strong windstorm off the coast like that evolving with the, snow from Raleigh that could be so impactful. But, yeah, so it rivals that. That's about the only other time I've had to forecast cold like this in the 6 years I've been doing this for the widespread area. So, that's very, impactful then. This is going to be very impactful now with the wind, though. That morning, I know the winds, how strong were those winds? I don't know if I can look that up right off, but I want to say those winds were not, as strong. Okay, well, I do have in my graphic, though, I did say that some zones could get into the single digits. I think that was more in Georgia, if I recall, though. And it was potentially the coldest holiday of Christmas since '89 then. So, yeah, but yeah, this is the coldest we've probably had, widespread since that end of 22 Christmas period for the area. So that's something to kind of keep in mind here. Again, don't think we really had the North Central Florida wind chills so much in the single digits, but it's something I have to explore back here, look back. So that's something to be very mindful of as we're looking and as we're tracking things here in toward the Weather Center. So that's kind of the storyline right now. I think that pretty much wraps it up. We'll be back here late Thursday or late Friday unless we need to pop back in earlier. I don't think we will here. Probably we'll have to have special coverage beyond that, more than likely, as the weekend approaches again. So we're in alert mode. We're going to keep you updated. Stay warm. This is some very chilly air here as we're looking and as we're tracking things here. So just be very mindful of that scenario here. As you know, this is some pipe bursting weather. I mean, even now you could have that in theory, for sure. But especially the more urban areas could even have it like Sunday morning. Could really catch people off guard being on the weekend. So, because you feel it's cold, you see similar temperatures, you don't realize it's a 5 degree difference. You know, going to hard freeze in the city of Jacksonville at the coast can actually really cause big problems there and be very impactful. Again, protect people. Even tonight, we're at 26 East Historic right now, but protect people, protect pets there, plants, pipes, pools there, and you got to remember practice fire safety because that's a hazard here as well. With this very dangerous cold, my friends, you need to be very careful, because that can lead to house fires here. That can be deadly. We see it sadly in winter, these cold nights a lot. And space heater can flip over, a curtain can be too close to one, and then that catches fire, and then you have tragedy on your hands, sadly. So, again, I know we have to keep folks with the ice storm, impact still remaining despite that, precip event being over for a couple of days. I mean, there's still, about 100,000 or so customers in the dark in the country, according to PowerOutage.us. We got to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Mississippi, Tennessee, and the like. Did all that impact. But the thing I do want to touch on here before we wrap it up here, of course, keeping everybody impacted by that ice storm in our thoughts and prayers with the next winter storm coming. As we're looking at the ice storm deadly here, something else that has impacted the meteorology community there. That was deadly on that Tuesday there. Happened in toward the Boise, Idaho area. So let me go ahead and I'll pull this up here real quick on our other source. Now, we did have a plane crash up in Maine on Sunday night, but then this one here actually impacted the weather community here toward Boise because the chief meteorologist at the CBS station there in Boise, Idaho, he was there on a small plane with another person, and it crashed, and he passed away. So just terrible, terrible news. His name is Roland Stedham there. He worked down there in Miami as well for a number of years at TV stations in that area. And he was a chief meteorologist at CBS2 in Boise, Idaho, and he passed away to Roland Stedham in that plane crash on Tuesday, a small plane crash, him and another person. And then my thoughts and prayers to everybody impacted by this at this very difficult time. Just awful, awful news here. Just terrible to hear. Thoughts and prayers to everybody's impacted, families and friends, and of course that CBS2 family there in the Boise, Idaho area. We're talking about KBOI TV there in Boise, where that, chief meteorologist Roland Stedham worked. He passed away in a deadly small plane crash on Tuesday. It was in the Piat River area there in that region. So just awful, awful news. You just hate to hear stuff like that. And he'd been in the business a long time. Not somebody that I actually watched too much there over the years, but did work in the Miami market for a while down there at a number of stations. So folks, watching now may even be familiar with his work. So just awful, awful news here, to hear about. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to the Florida map. You see these cold temperatures up here now. We're going to have to watch out Sunday morning even, that hard freeze getting all the way through central Florida even. And that could be an issue with some of the crops here that, we're talking about some of the, growers out there that they have to deal with, those farmers. We could have some issues with some of that. So got to be very mindful of that as we look ahead here in the days ahead. Because that could cause some damage, maybe significant damage like what we haven't seen in a while. So they're going to have to take special precautions, obviously, there in Central Florida. You have different types of things, and there's citrus there is one that always comes to mind as we're looking and as we're tracking things, as we're giving you guys the very latest. So, again, it's got to be very mindful of all that here as we look ahead in the timeline. Let me go ahead and see that 7-day forecast here one more time. You can see here just so cold, so please be bundled up. Please stay safe. 26 degrees, it's dark right now, and some of the other areas a little warmer than that. We had a cloud cover come in. We were down to 22 here earlier in our rural area with these calm type of winds. We didn't have that last night. We've had it tonight. That allowed us to really get cold. I know, very chilly out there. So just again, please be bundled up. Stay tuned, stay safe. We'll be back here with more in the days ahead as we're watching this very cold condition. These very cold local weather conditions. So very, very important to stay warm and stay safe.